Talkin Cougars is brought to you by Safeway. Come see what's fresh.
Welcome into Talkin Cougars. I'm former Washington State quarterback Alex Brink, joined by the one and only number 5, my wide receiver, Michael Bumpus. And Bump, we got a big one to break down. Not the Cougs' best performance last Saturday down in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, a loss 38-35, gave up a 14-point first half lead, and once again, 0 points scored by the offense in the third quarter. It was a second half to forget, my man.
Yeah, it really was. And thankfully for me, I don't know if this is a plus or a minus. I was in the airport in San Francisco. I get to watch the first half. We board the plane. It's a nice quick flight, like an hour 40. I land as like the fourth quarter, in the middle of the fourth, and I see what's going on. And I can't believe I got on the plane. I felt good about it. I go, okay, the offense is moving. The quarterback and running back are not running on us like I thought they would. We are good to go. And I land and watch the end of the game, and it's all bad. And then I have to go back and rewatch it. I thought I was going to rewatch a win, but unfortunately it went the other way. And I think New Mexico exposed some of our weaknesses, right? And I would expect Oregon State to jump on it and Wyoming to jump on it as well. But it is what it is. Our chances of going to the college football playoffs are officially over, but we can still get 10 wins. And we can still talk about some guys who have some good performances. I'll start it off. Kyle Williams, another great game. 9 catches, 181, and 3 touchdowns. This is his, third or fourth game over 100 yards. Back-to-back games with 3 touchdowns. He's balling at the right time. I just wish that this performance came in a win because he was pretty efficient that night.
He really was. And I'm going to be really honest. Like, when's the last time we've seen a deep threat like Kyle Williams at Washington State? There's been some really good receivers, right? And some guys that have been really productive. But K-Dub straight takes the top off Bump. He goes up and he makes contested catches. Look, John threw some good balls. They weren't perfect. They weren't out in front in stride. He had to go back and get them a little bit, right? He had a body on a body. I'm really impressed with the way, for a guy who's not huge, he's not a big receiver, he goes downfield and makes plays.
Yeah, it's impressive. He plays like he's 6'4", and I want to say he's like 6 foot. I sized him up once or twice. He's about my height, so to see him get behind the defense is the way that he does, and everyone knows he's going to try to do that. Arbuckle, he's going to call plays to get this young man open, but you still can't stop him, and you can tell John Mateer really trusts him. He'll throw it up there, sight unseen, and just say, you know what, I think my guy's going to come down with a big play. And he did exactly that, along with 43 the other night. Kyle Williams is putting together a great season, 870-plus yards, 11 touchdowns. He's ascending at the right time, man. I know he's going to get a look when it comes to playing on Sundays. But I have an idea who your MVP is. Talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think John Mateer played fantastic, honestly, right? Like, he starts out the game, he's 15-17 in the first half. He ends up throwing 4 touchdowns, 375 yards. He rushes for 65 yards and another touchdown. That's 5 total touchdowns he accounted for. He had a couple of those spectacular plays, Bump, right, where he's getting tackled, it looks like, shakes the defender off, then he scrambles and makes a throw, right? He does some things that are superhuman. He makes what is effectively the game-winning throw at the end of the game with 3 minutes left, hits K-Dub over the top to take the lead, and Cougs can't finish it off. I think John Mateer is my offensive MVP. A lot is being asked of this young man as a sophomore starter who started now 10 games. To feel like he has to shoulder the entire load for 4 quarters, I think is unrealistic. I think a huge miss in this game was going away from the running game to start the third quarter and not leaning into what Wayshawn Parker and Leo Pulalasi were doing to the New Mexico defense. A defense that, Bump, if you remember, it's a 3-down front, right? With 3 linebackers. That screams run first. And Washington State went away from that. They had great balance in the first half, and I think they leaned too much in the pass game in the third quarter, and that really hurt them. That being said, I thought John Mateer played fantastic. I agree that K-Dub's probably the real offensive MVP, but Mateer was a close second to me. What about on defense for you?
Yeah, defense was rough. Man, before I get to defense, I want to point out one thing. They started to spy Mateer as well. Like, you saw that backer walking up to the line of scrimmage. As soon as Mateer put that hand back or showed that he was going to run, boom, he went after him. But on defense, I think it's kind of hard to give an MVP on defense. Didn't get a lot of pressure. You let your quarterback or their quarterback run for like a $190 on you. Nothing felt good about the defense in the second half, and it's disappointing. It'll almost be a disservice if I were to sit here and say, this guy's the MVP on defense, because I think that as coaches and players watch the film and revisit what happened that night, nobody thinks they were up to par. And it's not a diss on them. That's just the reality of the situation. Nobody stood out and made enough plays when they needed to be made.
I hate to say it, man, but I agree with you. I mean, there were some guys that, were battling. There's no doubt about it. Nobody quit. Nobody gave up. But it felt like in the first half where the defense had a good feel for what New Mexico was doing and trying to contain Devin Dampier, that electric quarterback, and Eli Sanders, the running back. They were doing a really nice job. When New Mexico decided to make some changes and change their scheme, the Washington State defense did not react fast enough. And that starts with coaches, but it goes all the way down the food chain, as you know, Bump, to the players, starting with captains and then down to the rest of their group. And look, New Mexico, we'll talk about it later, right? New Mexico ran the same plays over and over and over again in the second half, and they couldn't be stopped. And to me, that is a real problem when you think about what this defense wants to do, like you said, going forward against Oregon State and Wyoming, who are two teams that are well coached, that are struggling right now, that are going to look at this tape and see some chinks in the armor.
Yeah, they're going to say, why not? They did it. Let's give it a shot. And Oregon State runs the ball 42 to 45 times a game. So, they're going to mix some things up. And they also have a couple quarterbacks back there who are mobile. But we'll save that commentary for later segments. When it's all said and done, the season isn't over. I know it feels like it's over because we had a legit chance to get into the college football playoffs. I watched the announcements today. It made me sick. I'm looking at all these teams get in. I watched Colorado move up. It's this was a tough pill to swallow, but when you watch the film, there's nothing that said that this team deserved to win that ball game. Offensively, they put up enough points. When you score 30-plus points, you're supposed to win the ball game. So this was a tough one. I think the probabilities, if you believe in that, had us at like 85% to win this ball game. But, you got to respect everybody. And the last time they were in New Mexico, we walked out with a win. That was back in 2004, man, when you and I were just some young pups.
Right, young guys, man. And we said it going into the game, Bump. This is a dangerous matchup, dangerous team on the road. Takes 4 quarters of football. Cougs couldn't come up with it. But like you said, 10 wins is on the horizon if they put it together and bring it for the next 2 games and they can rally. And that would be something that I think is still really special at Washington State with a great bowl game. As fun as the CFP conversation was, it's doubtful we would have made it in. That being said, this has been a fantastic season so far for Washington State. I'm looking forward to seeing these guys down in Corvallis and see them bounce back. We'll talk more about that matchup and the rest of what's going on with Coug football when we come back. This segment is presented by Cougs First. Think Cougs First for products, services, and hiring.
Welcome back to Talkin' Cougars. I'm Michael Bumpus with my QB, Alex Brink. It's time now to break down a play. This is a play that gave us all hope. The Cougs go up with time left on the clock, about 3 minutes, 25 seconds left, and K. Williams comes up with a big play from John Mateer. QB1, what did you see?
Well, it was a really nice play by Kyle Williams, once again going vertical, but I'm going to take a step back, Bump, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the formation and the set that Washington State was in. It was very unique. They went to it late in the fourth quarter. I'm a little baffled why they didn't use it more. They had 3 wide receivers to one side. It looks like a trip set, but if you look close, Cooper Mathers is also on that same side as a tight end in line. So they have 4 guys to the same side. It's unbalanced where they have the outside receiver, Carlos Hernandez, also on the ball. So that means Cooper Mathers has to stay in and protect. But on that drive, Washington State ran a number of running plays out of that formation that got them down close to that scoring zone, and it was really effective. I'm kind of, again, blown away they didn't use it more throughout the game. That being said, they run a really nice concept. It's 2 verticals from number 3 and number 2. Those are the 2 inside receivers. the number 3 receiver closest to the line of scrimmage, he's going to take away the safety in the backside corner. Kyle Williams has an inside seam that he can go vertical and maybe take a little bit towards the post, and then outside, that's what we call Z dig, where the outside guy, the Z receiver, is running a big 15-yard dig route. And what New Mexico does here, and it's a real problem for them, is they decide to play zero coverage, flat top across the top of those receivers. John Mateer sees it the whole way. They try and bring pressure, it doesn't get home. He takes the top off with Kyle Williams, what should have been the game winner.
Yeah, it was the right call against the right defense, because Mather's on that line of scrimmage, that backside corner's walked up to the boundary. As soon as the ball is snapped, he gets depth and he's looking for the crosser. So that number 3 receiver, the receiver closest to Mathers, is crossing the field, and he takes his guy and that corner with him. That Z-dig that you talked about is underneath. That's the just-in-case throw. If you can't get behind the defense, we're going to run this dig across the field so you have an outlet. You ran the dig and he was open. But this was all K. Williams. K. Williams is just fast. That's what this comes down to. I think he's running this route at an angle, and he's trying to get to his landmark. If you are the number 3 receiver, your landmark is to cross the hash and get to the other numbers. If you are Williams, it's best release at this point, because you know you have nothing to the right side of you with that dig going underneath. You essentially have 3/4 of the field to play with. And he didn't need it. He just used his speed. He got his head down and he went. And I think that in this situation, this is where you see the trust that Mateer has with K. Williams, because he could have gone to the dig, but he went for the kill shot. And that's something I appreciate about John Mateer too, man. He's not afraid to make a throw. He's not afraid to try to squeeze one in there in a tight window or just toss it up to his boy. We mentioned that earlier. That's what we saw right here. This was just, I am faster than you, and my QB has a cannon.
100%. Earlier in the game, speaking of that killer mentality, John Mateer, he had a 3rd and 1 going the other way in the second quarter. And instead of handing the ball off, he pulled it in an RPO and threw the vertical route for a touchdown. I love that, because he saw zero coverage, he saw man coverage, and he trusted his guys down the field. I think, your point about John Mateer starting to trust these receivers, also the way he threw the deep ball in this game gave me that same feeling, because he wasn't trying to throw the perfect ball, right? He was trying to throw a ball that was catchable. So at times, even this one is just slightly underthrown, right? It's not perfectly in stride, but as you know, as a receiver, all you want is a chance to go up and get the football, right? The worst thing a quarterback can do on a vertical throw is do what? Overthrow you, because you never have a chance to go get the ball. But if I give you a chance, you can go up, you can go on top of him, you can body him up. You just want a chance to get your hands on the football. And I thought John Mateer did a great job in this game of giving all the guys, particularly Kyle Williams, a chance to go up and make plays.
You can even underthrow me, because I'm going to put my foot in the ground, go up and get that pass interference, worst case scenario, which I think even as a receiver is a janky rule, man. It's crazy we can get a cheap one like that. But we'll take them any way that we can get. Focusing on Mateer a bit, I know this was a big play, simple play, this verse with a Z dig underneath. The way he throws from different slots, man. I mean, back in our day, you were over the top of the ball or nothing. The coaches didn't allow you to sidearm that thing and change the angle of your delivery, and that's something else he does a great job of doing. There's a lot of route concepts that the Cougs have where you got that shallow or that intermediate cross, and there's a lineman with his hands up and maybe a gap on the line. He's sliding to the right, and he's just flicking that thing, man, with a low slide with his elbow. That's something that impresses me as well. Those can get away from you. They tend to rise on you a little bit, but if you practice it, you perfect it. He hasn't perfected it, but that's something he has in his arsenal.
There's no doubt about it. And, I would say that as somebody who works a lot with quarterbacks and spend time working on guys' fundamentals, Mateer does the hard things easy, right? He changes the arm angle. He gets down low. He's able to find different windows, right, with the way he throws. Where he can get better and where the best, think Josh Allen, think Patrick Mahomes, guys that like to play off platform and use those different arm slots, they can always get on top when they have to, right? And turn it over those linebackers and down before the safeties. And I think to your point about the ball rising up sometimes is that John needs to learn how to command that football a little bit more, and that'll save him, make him even better as a passer than he is. But as a young player, there's always things to work on. And talking to John, he knows that he's got things to work on also. And I think, again, he does the hard things easy. And if he can make those easy things start coming really consistent, he's going to be really, really special. All right, coming up next, we're going to start to preview the matchup this weekend in Corvallis with the Oregon State Beavers. This segment is brought to you by Cougar Collective. Back here on Talkin Cougars, I'm Alex Brink, joined by Michael Bumpus. Let's take a listen to what Jake Dickert had to say about this matchup against the Oregon State Beavers coming up on Saturday.
I've never gotten into they're our buddy. Oregon State's not our buddy, right? You know what I mean? They would have left us as fast as we would have left them. You know what I mean? It just is what it is. It's one of our biggest rivals now. That's the way I've looked at it, and that's not bulletin board material. I just hope they would say it the same way. Let's go compete.
Well, Bump, Coach Dickert was pretty demonstrative in his press conference this week, talking about how the Beavs and the Cougs should coexist, what he thinks the relationship is. Obviously, Washington State and Oregon State are tied at the hip with everything happening with realignment. There's no doubt about that, but sounds like if you listen to Coach Dickert, when it comes to on the field between the white lines, there's no love lost.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I looked at some comments that people were making, and they're like, oh, it's us, we're together. I go, listen, that's for the fans, that's for the tailgate, that's for formal events, that's for the narrative of the Pac-2 when you look at the bigger picture. When it comes down to playing football, we got to go get it. We are not buddies. I was at a production meeting for CW, and I called the Oregon State-San Jose State game. And we interviewed two players, Jeremiah, one of the receivers over there, and one of their safeties. And it was formal. It was all good. As soon as we were done, they found out I went to Wazoo, and we started chirping. It's all out of love, but we're chirping. The competition aspect never leaves. And I think it's important that Dickert had that message coming off a loss. Like, these aren't our friends. They would have left. We would have left. We're just here together. We support each other off the field. But when it's time to play ball, man, you got to lace them up and go get it.
There's no doubt about it, Bump. And you talk about all the places that we can be friends with the Beavs and all the things you mentioned. The other part of it is in business, right? The business of the Pac-2, the business of the Pac-12. We can be buddies, right? We can help each other out. We can find a way to coexist and survive because we did get left behind. But to your point, when it comes to football, and Jake Dickert is a smart football coach, right? He's a great leader. He's saying these things for a reason. And the reason he's saying them is because right now, Washington State's in the lead when you talk about what it means to be the leader of the Pac-12. We're 8-2, a chance to go 10-2. Oregon State's struggling, right? There's recruits out there that are looking at that. There's guys in the transfer portal that are out there looking at that. And I think that was Jake Dickert playing the flag and saying, hey, Washington State's here to be the leader in the Pac-12, to be a consistent championship program, and that when it comes to between the lines, again, we're here to compete, right? And so I agree with you. I don't think there's any issues with it. I think people felt like there was issues with him saying that, one of them would have left if the opportunity existed. My thing with that is that they would have had to take both, right? Washington State and Oregon State. There was no opportunity for one or the other to leave. So I think Coach Dickert is just making the point that when it comes to competing, both on the field and when it comes to recruits and anything football related, right? It's Washington State through and through, man.
Yeah, for sure. He's just representing for the squad, man. I appreciate that. Well, let's for the last couple of minutes, let's focus on Oregon State and what we're gonna see. They've had a few quarterbacks get the start over there. Branson has been the guy. Giovanni has been the guy as well. They got three quarterbacks who can go. We know they want to run the football. Hankerson in the backfield. Last time I called their game, they ran the ball 45 times. 45 times. You know they want to put the ball on the ground. And after watching what the backfield was able to do against us in New Mexico, why would they switch anything up? If we can make them throw the football, that's where they start to break a little bit. But they're gonna want to make it a physical game.
No doubt about it. And I think there's a couple issues for Oregon State as I look at it, right? I watched that full Air Force game. And obviously Air Force is a really unique opponent. And when you're playing up in the mountains like that, there's a lot of things that are at play. The two big things I see from Oregon State, major quarterback issues, right? They have not found the guy for that program. You mentioned Giovanni McCoy, the Idaho transfer, fantastic player at the FCS level, won the job out of camp, didn't establish himself as the starter throughout the season, and they eventually go back to Ben Branson, who's undefeated as a starter from last year, and he didn't get the job out of camp. And you know how that goes, Bump. You've been in quarterback competitions. It's always hard when you're bouncing back and forth, right? And then, you think about, they have Jabari Johnson, the transfer from Missouri, who's a really talented player, great athlete. I think the fact that they haven't settled on a quarterback is a real challenge for Oregon State. The second thing, tons of injuries, right, on defense. And that's really hurt them when it comes to stopping the run. So for Washington State, when you talk about them wanting to be a physical game, Washington State has to make it physical also. They got to run the football and commit to running the football, and I think they can have success. That being said, Oregon State to me is a dangerous opponent, right? It's a wounded animal, back against the wall. You're playing at their house. This is their Super Bowl for the year. They're trying to stay in bowl contention, and Washington State has got to come with all 4 quarters ready to go in all 3 phases.
Yeah, they got nothing to lose. They have absolutely nothing to lose. You got a first-time head coach and Coach Bray over there. He's trying to set his foundation. Going to a bowl game is expected in Oregon State. For the past, 4 or 5 seasons, they've gone to bowl games. So they got a couple games to try to make that dream come true. So they're going to come out swinging. I expect a physical one.
Yeah, it'll be a physical one for sure. There's no doubt about it. And the Cougs, no doubt, licking their wounds a little bit coming off that tough loss in New Mexico. When we come back, Bump, we're going to go behind enemy lines and learn a little bit more about this Oregon State Beaver team. This segment is brought to you by Flat Stick Pub, local craft beer, mini golf, and old school fun. Welcome back into Talkin' Cougars, and Bump, we're bringing the enemy into the fold. Jason Jean-Baptiste is joining us from Talkin' Beavers. We're happy to have you, brother. I gotta ask, man, this 4-6 Beaver football team, I watched the Air Force game. Things are a challenge right now. But there was a lot of excitement coming into the season, and it just feels like it hasn't quite aligned for the Beavers. What should Washington State fans expect as they head in to this game in Corvallis?
Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me on, and thanks for pronouncing my name appropriately. I truly appreciate that, Alex.
Gotcha.
No, I mean you're right. There's a lot of excitement, coming into the season, especially early on. We rolled off a quick, 4 games, and then lost to Oregon. That was a tough one. But I think what happened is that somewhere in the beginning of the season, we started to get a little bit of the injury bug, which, devastated the offense, especially when Jam Griffin got hurt, who's transferred from Ole Miss, who was formerly from Oregon State, but then left for a year to Ole Miss and then returned. And as a team who runs the ball, and runs the ball a lot, to have one of your key running backs get hurt and not be able to replace them with another talented running back, I think really impacted and affected that offense. The inability to stretch the field, Bump, as you know, as a former wide receiver, stretching the field is a key part of the offense. I mean, it helps create more running lanes and not put 8-9 men in the box, and we have had the inability of doing that, so it's been a little bit hard on the offensive side of the ball. And then on the defensive side of the ball, it's the same thing. The injury bug has hurt us there, and it's been a struggle. And I think coming into this game against you guys, it really is about it being a game for us to get back on the winning track. It's senior day, and you have some really big seniors who this is their last home game, and the likes of Jaden Robinson, who's a cornerback for us, big time player. So for him to go out on a win at home, I think is a big thing. Same thing with Joshua Gregg, who's one of the key offensive linemen on the offensive side of the ball. So they're going to be charged up. They're going to be ready to go, and hopefully we'll get to see a really good game between those 2 programs.
Jay Robinson finally leaving. Would he been there like 10 years now?
Something like that. You know what? But it's been, Bump, it's been amazing to watch, him grow and see him, from the time that he was a freshman in a very similar way to Jaden Grant, if you remember him. He was there for a really long time, and Jaden Robinson kind of followed in that same footsteps of being at Oregon State for a long time. But honestly, like we needed his leadership as a senior, and we hope that he could go out with the win on top, at home.
I called the game against San Jose State, and I felt like Oregon State is at its best when it's a physical game, when Gray is getting on that second level, when Hankerson is gone, and then you get the play action going. I felt like Branson threw a couple good footballs going across the middle to Terry, your tight end. Do you think that should be the approach for this team, especially coming off of what you guys saw from Washington State against New Mexico? New Mexico made it a physical game, and we couldn't handle it. You think that's the MO for the Beavs this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, the formula has to be something along those lines. I think being physical up front, creating the space for Anthony Hankerson to run the ball, get some first downs. I mean, that was a struggle for us against Air Force. And I mean, ultimately, they were just really flat against Air Force. I think, for the offense to get going, you have to have the ability to run the ball, but you have to have the ability to also, complete some passes as well, too. You mentioned Jermaine Terry. He's another, senior who's going to be graduating as well, too. So for him to have a big game on Saturday, I think would mean a lot. And frankly, I mean, any of the wide receivers, Trent Walker, a former walk-on, has been huge for the Beavers this year. Without him and without his productivity, I don't know where we would be, because honestly, there hasn't really been a lot of productivity out of the wide receivers. So I think, it's a combination of both. And I think that's the winning formula against Washington State, is to be able to run the ball, but also put some points on the board, because you guys could score the ball. So you guys could score a lot. So we're going to have the ability to score the ball too.
Talking on the quarterback position a little bit, it's obviously been a challenge, for Oregon State. You lose Aiden Childs, the talented freshman. He goes with Jonathan Smith and the rest of that staff to Michigan State. And then you're trying to kind of, in the age of transfer portal and NIL, trying to backfill a little bit. Ben Branson comes back, but he loses out on the starting job out of camp to Giovanni McCoy, the Idaho transfer. You also have Jabari Johnson in the mix, who comes in from Missouri. It's kind of been a little bit of a revolving door to some degree, both because of injuries and obviously because of production. Maybe just give a quick breakdown of what Coug fans can expect from each one of those guys, because there's a chance all three of them could play.
No, and I wouldn't be surprised if all three of them play, to be frank with you. I think, we're still looking for whoever's the most productive. Some sense of, productivity from that position will be key in this game. You mentioned Branson. I think he's the best passer of the three. Giovanni McCoy is the best, dual threat. I mean, he could run with his legs, as you saw against Purdue and against Colorado State. He could light it up with running the ball, which is something that obviously we saw, like with the Lobos, that was a struggle and an issue for the Cougs. So I think you'll see a heavy dose of that if he's healthy. He struggled with a little bit of health himself this year. And Jabari Johnson is the young, quarterback. He doesn't have a ton of experience, so I don't really foresee him playing a lot and having a heavy dose unless he's forced to play. But I think you'll see a combination of everything, and see what works. I mean, that's honestly the formula that I think we'll implement going into the game against you guys on Saturday.
All right, well, Jason, you don't go anywhere, man. We're gonna run this back one more time. When we come back, more with Jason Jean-Baptiste.
This segment is brought to you by Valley GMC. See you in the Valley.
Welcome back to Talkin Cougars. We are still here with Jason Jean-Baptiste, giving us some inside info on these Beavers, man. We appreciate your time. Now it's time to shift over to the defense. There's some guys, some big names. You mentioned Jaden Robinson on the outside, the corner, who's been there for a while. Tell me about his style. I saw him match up with Nick Nash when they played San Jose State, when Nick got out to the outside. It was a lot of the time in the slot. But what makes him such a good player for the Beavs?
He's a physical guy. He's not necessarily of a big stature, but his physicality is always something that he likes to play with. And the reason why we like him matched up against best on best, and his just his ability to kind of dictate where the receivers are going and know the pass, the wide receiver route tree. That's something that's allowing him to be really productive. Obviously, his seniority and being in our program for a long time, and the experience of being in all kinds of games has also been something that we've taken advantage of. But also, the addition of having Skylar Thomas as well too, who was not there last year, and now is playing this year, and the two of them together, I think, make a fearsome duo. And for any opposing wide receivers or tight ends, I think they cause a little bit of a problem. So Jaden is key though. He's the if you ask me, he's the leader of that defensive secondary for sure.
He's going to have a challenge on his hand against Kyle Williams, who's had back-to-back 3-touchdown games. And Jason, we were talking off air a little bit about your career playing with Trent Bray, and it gave me a little bit of shivers, man, because you guys had a really good defense that Bump and I had to play against, and a great coordinator in Mark Banker that always had a plan, man. That's the thing about Coach Banker. I always remember, didn't matter the scheme, he had a plan. What's going to be new defensive coordinator Keith Hayward's plan to stop John Mateer in this powerful Washington State offense?
Put some pressure on him. I think, as you could attest to, Alex, I think any quarterback who feels that pressure and feels the need to get the ball out quicker than they like to, a lot of times leads to inefficiency and plays right into the hands of the defense. And I think for Keith Hayward and for Trent Bray, the head coach, who's a defensive-minded guy, we need to get pressure on him and need to, play tight coverage on the receivers. You mentioned Kyle being one of the main guys, and we know that. I mean, we know exactly what you guys do well. We know that you guys like to spread the ball around. We know that you have what to do with our quarterback and the ability to air it out, but also to run the ball, like when he doesn't see something. So, keeping him kind of in the pocket and not allowing him to have free running lanes when he doesn't see what he likes is going to be key for them. Thomas, Rollins up there, Thomas is going to be really big and get pressure at quarterback. Isaiah Chisholm, our linebacker there, who's manning the middle of the defense, is also going to be key. I would not be surprised if you saw a little bit of spy coverage, like where he's in the middle of the field just looking to see, what's going on with the quarterback and whether he's going to pass the ball or run the ball. And if he does decide to tuck it and run, he'll be right there to try and bring him down.
Jason, before we wrap up, can you give us a sense from the Beaver standpoint, maybe 30,000-foot view, right, about what this game means to them? You talked about Senior Day. Obviously, this is two teams that got left behind in conference realignment and have kind of risen from the ashes with the recreation of the Pac-12, but it's two teams this season that are going a little bit different directions, with an 8-2 Washington State team and a 4-6 Oregon State team. What would it mean for Oregon State if they could find a way to get this win?
Well, I think it'd be huge, Alice. I think for us as a program, it has not been the best of times. The last 2 years has been tough. Seeing all the teams that and programs that left Pac-12, and for some of them having really productive years this year, including you guys who stayed. We're the Pac-2, but you put it kindly, like we are going two different directions this year. And for us to be able to have a victory and be able to win on Saturday would mean the world to the fans, to the fan base, to the players and the coaches, because as winning a game of that caliber and that magnitude helps with recruiting, helps with putting butts in the seats, and it helps with the trajectory of next year. So and that's what the players have to realize. And if that's not enough for you to be excited about and for you to come out and want to win and have the heart and the determination and do so, I don't know what is.
All right, Jason, man, we'll let you get some sleep, man. We appreciate you coming out here as you do every single year and and blessing us, Jason Jean-Baptiste. Man, we got more coming up here on Talkin' Cougars.
Back now on Talkin' Cougars, I'm former Washington State quarterback Alex Brink, joined by record-setting wide receiver Michael Bumpus Bump. Cougs fell out of the college football playoff this week with that loss at New Mexico. Probably was expected, honestly. Two-loss Washington State team probably does not fit the mold based on their strength of schedule. That being said, there's some other teams in the top 25 with some suspect schedules, in my opinion. But again, I don't think it was a surprise that the Cougs dropped out.
No, it wasn't a surprise. It would have been a surprise if they were still in it, honestly. I didn't see the rankings release show, so I let it marinate a little bit. My phone wasn't blowing up, so I figured that we were probably bumped out. But when I saw it, it made sense. They still got some votes for like the second team out. But you had an opportunity to control your destiny, and you just didn't do that. I'm looking at teams like SMU and BYU. Like, those are teams that are on the cusp of really getting in that thing, and they're going to need some help. And they're going to need it quickly because time is running out, and I want those type of teams to get into the mix. There was this young man I talked to today. He's an aspiring play-by-play guy over at Washington State. I hopped on a Zoom with him, and he said the best thing for college football right now, bear with me, is that Oregon wins the national championship. And I said, all right, why is that? And he said, it's because Phil Knight went out there and put all this money out there. And that's the only way college football will start to regulate themselves, when someone outside of Bama, Georgia, Clemson, the Blue Bloods, Notre Dame, someone outside the Blue Bloods wins a championship and is extremely competitive. Then they're going to start putting some sanctions and regulations on stuff. And I thought that was an interesting concept. As much as I don't want to see it happen, I think the young man had a point.
I think it's a really good take, actually. It's a hot take. I love it. I think it's very true. I mean, it's the best team that money can buy out of Eugene right now. And, they're playing the best for sure. They played the best this year. There's no doubt about it. A team that's sneaky to me, that's trending in the right direction. How about the Arizona State Sun Devils, Bump? And think about the job that Kenny Dillingham has done since he left as the OC of Oregon to go take that head coaching job down there. It was a team that was sanctioned when he got there, right? Which is typically a death knell for a new coach. He rebuilds that program both through a mix of transfer portal, great coaching, hires great coaches, NIL support. He gets a great young quarterback out of Michigan State, Sam Levitt, who I know very well from my time here in the state of Oregon. And they got that man, Cam Scattaboo, the running back. And boy, they're making waves. They have a chance, Bump. If they beat BYU this weekend and get into the Big 12 championship and win the Big 12 championship, they can get in to the college football playoff potentially. That's an interesting team that's outside of those top 12 right now.
Arizona State came out of nowhere. They were winning ball games, but you weren't really paying attention until really this last week, when obviously WSU loses and they climb themselves in there. Another team that could win the Big 12 and make some noise, primetime, baby, Colorado. If they end up winning that conference, they're in the college football playoff, and all the critics and haters can just shut their mouths when it comes to Deion Sanders. He's not doing it the traditional way. He's kind of in the forefront of this. Okay, pay your players, hit that transfer portal. We're not recruiting high school type of way of doing things, and he's done a good job. Going into this season, I didn't expect much out of the Buffs. I really didn't. I thought last year they were hot for 3 or 4 weeks and then kind of came back to reality. But Deion's done a good job with recruiting and getting good coaches over there. The Buffalo sidelines remind me of USC sidelines back in the day when we were playing with all the celebrities over there.
I know it does. And you know what? If Coach Prime and that whole group end up making it to the college football playoff, good on them. They've worked really hard for that. And the first person will tell you to shut the haters up will be my man, Coach Prime. There's no doubt about it. But honestly, they have a chance. They got to beat Kansas, who's been playing really well and got a big win in their own right against BYU, right? So the path is still hard for all these teams. And that's the hard thing, Bump, about this college football playoff is the final 2 weeks of the season plus the conference championship games, right? There's going to be so much movement, right? What happens in the SEC? Because if a 2-loss SEC team gets into their championship game but loses, they're out. They're not getting in. And so I just think over the next couple of weeks, it's going to be wild movement. We've seen it. We've experienced it as Cougs. And I think it's only going to get crazier from here.
Yeah, you got guys like Lane Kiffin saying with 2 losses, saying, I don't know if I want to play in the SEC championship game because he knows who you're going to have to see. You're going to have to see Georgia. You're going to have to see Bama, maybe even Tennessee. And if Ole Miss at 10-2 goes into the championship game and they lose, they are out and they are probably playoff worthy. That's the thing about the SEC. They're going to try to get automatic bids here eventually because they are the better conference, them in the Big Ten. So there's going to be some things to figure out. As soon as you try to appease people and you put 12 teams in that thing, there's always something else coming up that's going to challenge the authorities in the system that we know to be the college football playoff system.
Yeah, my hot take, jumping off the back of the young man you talked to about Oregon, is that if a team other than Oregon that's outside of the Big Ten or the SEC goes and wins the championship in that true playoff format somehow, that would be the best thing for college football because that would make sure that the SEC and Big Ten don't get those automatic qualifying bids just because they think they deserve it, right? What if one of those teams outside those conferences goes and wins it, right? That means it should be about the meritocracy. It should be about earning it. You shouldn't just be guaranteed 4 spots because you're the SEC and the Big Ten.
Agree 100%, man. Great take by that young fella, Max. All right, man, when we come back, we'll put a bow on this thing. I'm Michael Bumpus. That's Alex Brink, Talkin Cougars.
Welcome back on Talkin Cougars. It's time for our final thoughts as we head in to this game in Corvallis against Oregon State. A huge matchup of the Pac-2, newly formed Pac-12, Oregon State Beavers, Washington State Cougars. Bump, if Washington State is going to win this game, they have to run the football, and they have to commit to it. 2 weeks ago against Utah State, they committed to it to the tune of 300 yards rushing. Last week against New Mexico, they went away from it. This Oregon State Beaver team has given up a ton of yards rushing. They're susceptible to running the football. And between John Mateer, Wayshawn Parker, and Leo Pualasi, and that offensive line, I think Ben Arbuckle needs to commit to running the ball.
I'm with you. You know that the Bees want to make this a physical game, and I think that the Cougs can play a physical game. We actually run sets with tight ends. We have 2-back sets. We've seen it all. Parker is that get behind your guard and just let him go type of player. So I'm all for that. I also want Mateer to continue to be himself. We know if he doesn't account for 4 or 5 touchdowns, it's going to be a tough day for the Cougs. That is a lot to ask from that young man, but he's shown every single week that he can do it. I think you have to force the Beavs to throw the football. They do not want to throw the rock. If they do throw it, it's going to be a 3rd and long type situation, or they're going to try to hit you with a play action inside the red zone. They don't want to throw it. They have a good running back over there in Hankerson who's shown that he can do a little bit of everything. He can catch a football at the backfield too. So just do what you're supposed to do. Get this done. Get to 9 wins, and let us focus on Wyoming to end this thing. And we'll end the show on that right here, man. I'm Michael Bumpus. That's Alex Brink. You can find me this weekend on CW bright and early, man. They got me on at 9 a.m. on CW this weekend. And then on Sunday, I'll be on the Seahawks broadcast. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter, Michael Bumpus 5.
I'm Alex Brink. You can find me on X at AlexBrink10. I'll be on the call with Chris King and Jessamine McIntyre down in Corvallis. I don't got to get on a plane this week, Bump. I'm driving down there. It's going to feel good to call, hopefully, a big Coug win. Thanks for joining us. Episode 13, Talkin Cougars. That's a wrap.